Just reminded me to have my phone on silent.
Yeah.
So any annoying noise during the time.
All right, everyone. So we have just started recording. There's Dr. Smith. My name is Daisy Daniel. I'm a doctoral student at Kansas State University. I'm also the student representative for Counselors for Social Justice. And we luckily had Dr. Shon Smith have some time in his schedule for us to quickly pull this together. Super quick turnaround with Mary Hufstead, who is student representative of AMCD, and Christian Chan, who's student representative of ALGBTIC. Like I said, I muted all of you just so that we can hear Dr. Smith more clearly, but feel free to unmute yourselves if you have questions, or like I said, if you scroll over our faces at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a chat box that will pop up to the right-hand side of your screen. You can type in questions there. And the dynamic today is, so we have Dr. Smith for the next 40 minutes or so. We're going to ask him a ton of questions, let him talk a little bit about who he is and what he does, and then he'll have questions for you. And then me, Mary, and Christian will be towards the end of the 40 minutes to answer doctoral student questions for you as well. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to Dr. Shon Smith. He is currently faculty at University of Florida in counselor education program. He has 17 years of experience as a counselor educator and currently sits on the faculty of counselor education programs at the University of Florida. His primary research interests areas of multicultural and social justice counseling, clinical supervision, counseling education, programming evaluation, leadership and advocacy within the counseling paradigm. Additionally, he works with and connects research with interpersonal violence perpetrators and victims and dual populations, mental health and substance abuse with veterans and military families on adjustment and readjustment issues, and has been a professional counselor for over 23 years. So he's doing all of the things. So luckily for us, he had a few hours in his Sunday to talk to us. So I'm going to give it straight to Dr. Smith. Thanks for coming.
Ms. Daniel, thank you very much for that intro. And I'd like to also welcome Ms. Hofstad and Mr. Chan. It's a privilege for me to be sharing this platform with the three of you, aspiring doc students coming up through the profession. So I wanted to say thank you to each of you as well. And I just, I guess I am just available to take any questions that anyone may have. I guess to start off, a little bit about myself, I guess, in addition to what's already been shared. I am originally from Pennsylvania, born and raised. Spent 40 years there, minus the military stints, until I relocated here to Florida. I'm also a veteran, so for any veteran that has joined us today, I want to thank you for your service, and for any family members that are veterans, I want to thank you also for your service and all that you've done. So currently, I am the past chair for the Southern region of the American Counseling Association. Essentially, that means I represent the 21,000 members of ACA that reside in the South. That's 21,000 out of the 56,000. My role there is to provide mentorship over the branches and the incoming leaders, and mentor new branches and new leaders coming in. I am the past president of the Florida Counseling Association, as well as past president of the Pennsylvania Counseling Association. And I've also served on the board of the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development as secretary back in in 2006, 2007. So I would like to get an idea. This forum is specifically for graduate students, so I'd like to just get an idea of which type of graduate students do we have joining us today? Meaning, do we have master's students? Do we have doc students? If Ms. Dan, if you could share that, or do you know that information?
So I shared this with all of the listservs. So I would assume that we would have both mostly master's and undergraduate students who are thinking about applying, since that was kind of the premise of the webinar. But if people want to share where they're at in their programs, you're more than welcome to type it out for us, so we can go that route, or unmute yourself and you could share it that way. If not, I have a question for you that could kick off the question and answer portion.
All right, go right ahead.
So while people are typing in where they're at in their programs, I was wondering, for students who are interested in applying currently to a counselor education PhD program, what are the 3 things that you're looking for as a faculty from their application?
Great question. Great question. Now, are you asking that as a program, or are you asking that as an individual counselor educator that's been in the field?
So let's do both. So I would say, like, if I'm from a master's program, straight from master program, maybe I only have clinical experience from my master's program. Or also, I know we have some clinicians who are coming back from like not necessarily leaving the field, but are looking to expand with getting a PhD after they've already been in the field with a master's degree for like 3 years.
Sure, certainly. Well, for the most part, now I've worked full time at 4 institutions, and 2 of those 4 institutions have had a master's degree and a doctoral degree. So I've experienced working in both with both students and in both programs. In regards to what a program would be looking for and pertaining to a doctoral candidate, it would be an individual that would have a master's degree in counseling or an equivalent degree. And what I mean by equivalent degree, most programs will accept after a review of an individual that has a master's in counseling psych, a master's in psychology, an MSW. So they will do a review to see if the coursework is equivalent to a master's program. If not, many programs will set up some additional coursework that that student or candidate may have to take in order to complete their doctoral program. So understand that. Also, many of the doc programs require the GRE scores. That's just part of the process. Some do not. In regards to what we're looking for students that are have strengths in writing. All right. And when I say strengths, either they have a strong writing background, or they're open to being mentored to learn how to write. The other piece is some experience working with all populations and on many different levels. Ideally, working in the setting in which they want to specialize in. So if they desire to work in substance abuse, we're looking for that diversity of individuals working in substance abuse. If they're a school counselor, looking for individuals that are working with children or school-age population, families, all of that's the same. Many programs will weigh how long a student has been out of their master's program and applying to a doc program. Now, again, they'll accept all candidates and all applications that have met the minimum criteria. But in order to make that cut, you're going to look at GRE scores. You're going to look at the work you've done post-master's or within your master's program. You're going to look for a sense of professional identity within the counseling field. either on a state level, local level, regional level, national level, or just within your community. So looking at that sense of professional identity within the counseling field. And the Counselor Ed program is set up from a doctoral perspective. And what I mean by that is the emphasis is around clinical supervision, education, research, advocacy, and leadership, as well as the clinical work. Many of the doc programs allows flexibility in regards to where students want to specialize in. And generally that comes up either in a cognate, meaning 9 to 12 credits are specialized to a particular area, and once students hit their internship experience, there's opportunity to have some specialization in what they want to do. And then the ultimate project called the dissertation. That really identifies their specialization in the field. I believe that the strongest students that apply to the program are individuals that have had a minimum of 2 years post-master's experience. Obviously, the license is ideal, however, not required. And the reason I'm saying a 2-year experience is if your primary purpose in going back and getting your doctorate in counselor education, if it is to be in the classroom, you're going to be teaching and training individuals to become counselors. You're going to be supervising individuals to ensure they have the theoretical skills, the basic counseling skills, the techniques, in order to best support the client population that they're serving. What better way to add to that teaching experience, that clinical experience, than one that has already been in the field doing that work? Certainly, I'm not suggesting that individuals cannot be trained up. However, if you're talking about a collective ideal candidate, that 2 years post-master's really, I believe is important. And again, based on my experience, many students that have gone directly from their master's program to a doc program, they've seen that, and they've had to do some additional training in their doc program to close that gap compared to the other classmates that may have had that experience or have been licensed.
Thank you. So we do have some students. So Jordan said, I'm a second-year master's student at Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. I'm interested in counseling education doctoral programs. And then Ashley, hello, I'm a master's student at the University of Central Florida. In my second year, I'm interested in pursuing doctoral programs in counselor education and supervision directly following obtaining my master's. And then Caroline said, I'm a third-year master's student, Mercer University, Atlanta, interested in research counseling PhD. So again, don't be shy. Make sure you guys are asking questions. So I probably should have started, Dr. Smith, with asking you why counselor education over, say, counseling psychology?
Great question. Know that our colleagues that are psychologists or counseling psychologists, we work with the same population, and we work in the same area, and the same areas oftentimes. However, one of the big distinct differences between the two is the emphasis around the counselor education piece compared to a counseling psych program. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other. I'm simply identifying the difference between the two. As a counseling psychologist, primary responsibility in that area is assessment and evaluations. Their training program, on the most part, generally speaking, has much more rigor around assessments and understanding assessments, administering assessments, and interpreting them. Counselor education does train individuals to provide assessments, but that's not the emphasis. The emphasis within the counselor education programs are more on learning how to teach, learning educational theory, bringing that to the classroom, while building upon clinical experience that has already been in existence. Also, the emphasis and focus is around clinical supervision, is also a key emphasis in the counselor education program. Many counseling psychologists have begun their process from master's and have worked through a counseling psych program to obtain a PhD or a PsyD, whereas counselor educators, our terminal degree is the master's. You can be licensed and basically set up shop at a master's level. That is our terminal degree. Anything beyond that is going to be used specifically to teach, provide some additional specialized training, or just based on your preference on what you want to do. So those would be the two big distinctions between the two programs. In counseling psych programs, you may see a bit more rigor in regards to research and things such as that. But however, if you're looking for a counselor education program, I would look at the program. Look at Research One institutions where they have a legacy of producing and developing researchers, because they are there. But what you will find more often than not in counselor education programs compared to counseling psych program is the specific training around how to teach and how to supervise, and actually now how to lead. Advocacy and leadership competencies are part of the counselor education and supervision programs. Also, if you want to teach, if that's one of your primary goals, whether you're want to teach full-time or even on an adjunct level, primarily full-time, the CES degree will be the preferred degree in CACREP accredited programs, counselor education programs. And that's not to say that counseling psych cannot teach in CACREP programs, because they can. However, the preference will be and is a degree in counselor education supervision.
Thank you. I actually had another question if no one else has a question. I'll just keep throwing them at you. So for students who have decided, weighed all the information out that you just said and decided that counselor education is for them, how do they go about crafting a personal statement or a letter of interest that highlights why they want to be in counseling education and supervision?
Yeah, great question. Essentially, what I would highly suggest is, and this may sound like a faculty member, but hey, in your career class, if you haven't taken it or if you have taken it, go back to your career class and really sit down and do an evaluation and assessment on the next phase of your life. What is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to achieve? And when do you want that to occur? And if pursuing additional formal training is in that, then sit down and you attack that with the same passion that you attack anything else that you're passionate about, whether it be a relationship, whether it be that master's degree, whether it be your children, whether it be your boo, whether it be that pet. You just attack it with that same passion. And what that is, and what that looks like is meeting with your mentors, all right? The mentors that you currently have in your master's program, the mentors that you have outside of your master's program. Meeting with your circle, all right? Your circle of support. Because it's those individuals that are really going to be there to support you and hold you up at times. Because you're not going to be available to them like you are currently. So that's where I would start and have that heart-to-heart with them. Then begin the process of simply doing your research. What type of program do you want? All right. Do you want to go to a teaching institution and learn where the primary, the emphasis in that program will be to train individuals how to teach? All right. Or do you want to go to a program where the focus is research? All right. Or you want to go to a program where the focus is social justice. Many programs have different identities. So begin that process. Also, once you've identified, I would say between 3 to 5. I wouldn't go that much further than that, because all this costs. All right, there is an application fee, most part. I would set up an informal meeting with a faculty member at that institution in that doc program, simply to connect with them. I would also reach out to any doc students and speak with them. So you can get the experience from a doc student, and you can get the experience from the faculty member. And just have a conversation with them. Just have a conversation with them. If you're able to go visit them prior to any type of required documentations need to be submitted, do that. What I've been seeing recently is a lot of doc programs are offering virtual open houses, where maybe once a semester they are basically having an informational session about their doc program. Be aware of those, so you can get a lot of information that way. And simply doing the old school thing by going online and requesting information on a doc program, and what that program's about. So that's where I would begin. If you are currently if you're currently in your master's program and it has a doc program, certainly talk to the doc students that are currently there. Share with them what you are thinking about, what you want to do, and pick their brain. Simply pick their brain. And when you do this, utilize your counseling skills and to find out what's going on. But definitely. So that's where I would start.
Okay, so we actually have a question from Jordan. So in Texas, like most states, we complete post-grad hours for licensure. So in Texas, it's 3,000 supervised hours. Is it advisable to apply to a doctoral program before completing those hours, or wait until full licensure is achieved? Do doc students in counseling education programs typically already have a state licensure? I am interested in moving directly from my master's into a doc program. So should I plan on waiting to attain state licensure before applying to a PhD program?
Yeah, great question. There are benefits to waiting to be licensed in your program. It all really depends on what you want to do and also what the program's looking at. If you recall, I mentioned the 2-year period, 2 years post-masters. As we all know, different states have different licensing requirements, post-masters licensing requirements. Some have 2 years, some have 4 years. So that varies based on the state. But if you are, I would say the 2-year mark would be the mark that you should look for if you're looking to get your doc program or go into a doc program. However, again, programs accept individuals coming right out of their master's program. Again, I'm speaking from the perspective of lived experience and what you're going to be able to absorb and also provide to the students in the program. So, for example, when you're a doc student, you're going to be required to do some level of teaching of the master students and perhaps the undergrad students. You're going to be required to do some level of clinical supervision of the master students. You're going to be required to do some level of research, and you're going to be required to do some level of advocacy and leadership. all during your doc program while you're completing classes. So that's the rationale that I'm providing for that 2 years post-master's experience. The more experience you can bring in, the better prepared you're going to be to do that. Also, the much richer the learning experiences are going to be for the students you're going to teach and the students you're going to supervise.
Okay, thank you. So we had another question from Ashley. Hello, Dr. Smith. I know that the format for a master's program is typically approximately 1 year of coursework, a semester or two of practicum, and then a semester or two of internship. What is the timeline/format like for doctoral programs?
Another excellent question. Based on program, it's also obviously based on specific programs. However, I would say roughly you can complete the entire process depending on if you're going full-time and part-time, because that's another thing you have to look at. Some programs are only full-time, and they only accept you if you're full-time. Others have some flexibility, and they'll do part-time. But for the most part, you can complete your doc program between 3 and 5 years, depending on if you're going full-time. So you would have to think of it from the perspective of 2 to 4 years of coursework and roughly 1 to 2 years focusing specifically on your dissertation. And when I say coursework includes any practicum or internship that you will be doing. Because in a CES program, Counselor Education Supervision Program, you are required to do an advanced practicum experience. And you're also required, which is 100 hours, minimum of 100 hours. And then you're also required to do a minimum of 600 hours of a advanced internship experience that will include clinical supervision, teaching, research, advocacy, and leadership.
Okay, thank you. So another question is, when students are looking for letters of recommendation, what is the best way for them to ask professors for letters of recommendation, and like what are the strongest letters that you've seen?
Another excellent question. If you recall, when I suggested if individuals are looking for programs, go back to your career class on what you learned, and the piece about asking for references and recommendations, that's where this comes into play. Obviously start with your faculty advisor. Your faculty advisor should have been the one that was your strongest advocate, but also strongest advocate, biggest cheerleader, but also strongest critic. They should know you very intimately, both on a personal level and a professional level. So certainly start with them. Any major professors within the program that has seen your work, most specifically, the individual that was supervising you during your clinical experience. That would be one that I would definitely seek a letter of reference or support. And the site supervisor in which you completed your practicum or internship experience at. That also. So you want you want someone to be able to speak to your academic development and potential. You want someone to speak to your clinical experience, all right? And you want someone to speak to the service aspect, community aspect, all right? Do not use family members. Do not use friends as reference letters. But that's what programs are looking at. They're looking at current academic standing and academic potential. All right. So anyone that you presented with, anyone that you have published with, anyone that you have done specific work with in the program. If you have taken leadership positions on as far as Chi Sigma Iota, or did some initiatives for the counseling program, whichever faculty member worked with you directly, that's who you want to go to. For those that have been out of school or that are actually working while they're in their master's program, your employer, particularly if it's relevant to counseling, even if it's not relevant to counseling per se. For example, if you're doing work, in the business field and you're in a supervisory capacity, have them write a letter, because we are also looking to develop leaders within the counseling profession. And that skill set is just as valuable.
So based on those same lines, also Ashley, would you judge a letter of recommendation from a psychologist different than you would one from a counselor educator?
A psychologist from what perspective?
So, for instance, in my master's program, there was a psychologist who oversaw our training clinic. So they know my counseling skills better than anyone, but they're a psychologist, even though my master's program is a counseling program.
Yeah. Nope, that won't be an issue at all. In fact, that's exactly who you want. If that individual has been supervising you for your 600 hours, your 700 hours, your 1,000 hours, that is the exact person you want to write a reference for you. Yes. So if they're a psychologist, if they're a social worker, that piece doesn't matter, because they're speaking to your competency and your development through that experience.
Okay, so a question from a different Ashley. How was your time as a doctoral student similar or different to your current role as a faculty member?
Great question. For me personally, our model, our program was a cohort model, and I actually had 21 other members of my cohort that went through the program together. And it was a structured cohort, meaning if someone were to drop out, they would literally have to wait a year to come back in, come back into the program. So it was a lockstep cohort model. I would say the biggest difference for me was I had more professional and personal growth in my doc program than I've ever experienced. All right, The connections and relationships I made with the other 21 individuals at that time, we still meet once a year in the city where my program is at. Our little ones that started out, my son, I'm a father of three. I'm divorced. I'm a father of three. And when I started my program, my oldest one was 8. He's now 22. My youngest one was 3. He just turned 17. So you hear these similar stories of your classmates, and their children have grown up. So we catch up once a year. So those personal connections are very, very significant, as well as the professional connection. I would say 18 of us have actually completed our dissertation, so we are doc. There's 2 that are ABD. And I would say 50% are actually teaching in the classroom full time, and everyone is teaching on a part-time basis or doing supervision. And I had a variety of experience. We had individuals that private practice, school, pastoral counseling, rehab counseling, family focus, community services, substance abuse, psychiatric rehab, all across the board, working with eating disorders, working with trauma, just a number of skill sets in individuals. So maintaining those contacts, maintaining those relationships with individuals, and hear what I'm saying. Everybody doesn't get along with everyone. All right. So I'm not saying that you have to do that. However, take full advantage, in my opinion, take full advantage of those experiences, opportunities in your master's program as well as your doc program, the counseling field, the counselor education field is a very small world. You don't realize it until you actually get in it. And you will start seeing the same people, reading individuals' work, and next thing you know, they'll be right there beside you. So that's why I say that. But for me, I think I grew the most personally and professionally during my doc program.
Thank you so much for that. So we have a question from Sam, who says, I'm currently an undergraduate senior attending University of North Carolina, Greensboro. I'm planning to pursue my master's degree in counseling, but I'm unsure what track I want to focus on. I am leaning towards higher education or school guidance counseling, but I know these two paths are pretty specific. What track do you all feel is the most versatile in the counseling field?
That's also a great question, and I'm going to punt back to you. And the reason I'm saying that is, you need to ask the question for yourself, and actually sit on it for a little bit. Of what do you want to be when you grow up? Because once you're able to figure that piece out, other things will fall in line. There's reasons why we have specific tracks within the counseling field, its specialty areas. Now, I've always believed, and I will continue to believe, that the counseling profession as a whole, we're all together. It's one, think of it as a branch. And then think of it as a tree and the trunk, that's counseling. And the specialty areas are the branches that come from counseling. So individuals that focus on working as school counselors, that's just a branch of being a counselor. Individuals that want to work in college counseling, you're still a counselor. Individuals that want to work in clinical mental health, all right, you're still a counselor. Rehab counselor, you're still a counselor. Marriage and family counselor, you're still a counselor. So I've always thought of our profession that way, and I will continue to do so. But we're counselors first, and we operate in specialty discipline areas second. But I would say figure out what you want to do when you grow up, really, and do the research, do the work. And really, the reason I'm saying, I could tell you to go get a clinical mental health, because in our field, that's the generalist degree, and the other programs are specialty areas. However, that's a huge investment. All right, that's a huge investment. As many of you know, it's a 60-hour program, and with at least a minimum of 700 to 1,000 hours. And then there is 2 to 4 years of training experience that needs to occur after you've completed the master's degree. Then you have to sit for this exam. And you have to provide a donation to sit for that exam. And you have to provide a donation to apply for your license. So there's a lot of time vested in it and financial costs. So whereas school counseling, that those financial commitments aren't the same, versus higher education. Those financial commitments aren't the same. The time is, but some of those things are different. So that's why I say you have to ask the question for yourself: what do I want to be when I grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. Any advice for those of us attending ACA in March? I have plans to connect with professors from doctoral programs I am interested in applying to. Specifically, those who I share similar research interests with. But is there anything else I should be doing at ACA? From Ashley.
Great question. Great question. I actually do an induction for our master's students and our doc students when we go to conferences, whether it be a state, regional, or national. And that part of that induction is, one, to identify and talk about boundaries. All right. Certainly, when we go to conferences, there is a social network there and there's a professional network there. Many of us are there to do both and to experience those opportunities fully and completely. So depending on where you're at in your program, if you're a first year, if you're a first-year master's student or first-year doc student, my recommendation would be to go to conferences and simply absorb everything you can. All right. Look in the program and look at everything that says first timers, and attend those. All right. Attend those. If you are a second year master's student finishing up, all right, and depending on your next step, if it's a doc program or if it's to get into the field, seek out those training or those educational sessions that speak to that. All right, that speak to that. If you're interested in doing some writing, if you're interested in doing any type of leadership or advocacy work, attend those particular educational sessions, those meetings. There's 20 divisions within ACA. There are special interest networks, and they all meet during that time. Connect yourself with those individuals and the graduate student representatives for those divisions. Connect with your region, your branch, and your region leaders. If you want to work, they will find a space for you. No question about that. Now, if you're a doc student at the tail end of your doctoral program, all right, one, you should be presenting at these conferences if you're at the tail end. All right, whether it be poster presentations, whether it be full-blown educational sessions, or co-presenting with your faculty. All right, that should be happening as a standard if you're a doc student. All right. Now, if you're finishing up and you're seeking employment, the strategy looks like this. All right. If you are presenting, okay, and you are eyeballing a particular region or a particular institution, all right, do the homework and find out who's going to be at the conference from that institution. See if they are presenting. If they are presenting, you definitely need to attend their session, and you definitely need to let them know when you are going to present, invite them to your presentation, all right? So that you can build those connections there, all right? So you can build those connections. Once again, the counseling field is a small world. Counselor education field is even smaller. So I talked with our students about this and how to strategize and how to network, all right? And seek those relationships outside of your program, because again, nothing at all against your classmates or your cohorts. It's good to get some insight of how other programs do things.
Thank you so much. So the last question we have for you is from Alicia, who says, are you able to comment on what kind of questions or conversations we can expect if and when called for interviews to the counselor education doc programs that we applied to?
Yes. And again, based on the program, you know, they're going to be a little bit different. However, be expected to speak to teaching experience and what you want to do with that. Be prepared to speak to clinical supervision, either received or provided. Be prepared to speak to research. All right, research. Be prepared to speak to leadership and advocacy opportunities. And then be prepared to speak to clinical experiences, whether it be as a school counselor, mental health counselor, rehab counselor, you know, your work with people. Be prepared to speak to that. And be open to the opportunities that are even presented in that interview process. All right. If you have been invited for an interview, generally it's going to look like an interview process that you have not experienced before. Meaning, it's not an hour. It's not a half hour to an hour meeting one-on-one with individuals. That experience is going to be most likely a half to full day experience. It might even be 2 days, where you're going to be meeting with doc students, master students, faculty, and other leaders within the program. And doing so in a social environment, but also a professional environment. And you have to keep in mind that you are on an interview, that you're being interviewed, and you are interviewing them. You are interviewing them. So I would also be prepared to ask them questions while you're there. And the biggest question, and the first question I'd be prepared to ask is, how much money are you going to give me to come here? Because what you will find out, all right, in our particular field of counseling, the resources, particularly the financial resources to go back to school as a doc student, are limited. They're there, but they are very competitive, all right? They're very competitive. So how you can get an advantage in that is opportunities that you're coming in as far as research. If you've done research work in your master's program, if you've published, if you've presented, that's going to give you some opportunity. Your GRE scores, it is what it is. Your GRE scores. Alumni relations. If you go back to a program where you graduated from, there may be specific funding earmarked to individuals that are alumni of the programs that are returning. So those things. So that'd be the first question. How much money are you gonna give me? Also, look for two-for-ones. And what I mean by that is, in the student affairs section of institutions, oftentimes they look to doc programs, counselor ed programs, to fill some of the graduate assistantships that are available in the multicultural office, in the intercultural relations office, in student housing. If you are okay being potentially an RA or someone that oversees a particular dorm, you can get a tuition waiver, you can get housing, and you may even get a stipend. So you may get some money in your pocket. Look to tutoring opportunities if you have an undergrad background in tutoring in some way. And then athletics. Look to partnerships with the athletic department and working with the athletes of the institution as far as additional graduate assistant opportunities. So essentially, how much money are you paying me to come? That has to be one, because it has to factor into it. It really does. The other piece is, what type of mentoring and advisement protocol do you have in this institution? So this is what I mean. When you enter into your program, are you assigned a student mentor, someone that's there to support you at a minimum your first year in the doc program, all right? Your first year. But ideally through the lived experience of that mentor and you, all right? That's the first thing. The other piece is, what does the advisement look like with the faculty, okay? What does the advisement look like for the faculty? My recommendation and suggestions are that if your faculty member currently, all right, does not request to see you at least once a semester, then you need to set up an appointment and see them once a semester, okay? I've always had the philosophy that if I'm your advisor, I need to see you at least once a semester minimally until you graduate. And my rationale for that is, I can't advocate for you, I can't support you, I can't be your coach, and I certainly cannot be your critic if I don't know you. So ask what the mentoring protocol is and the advisement protocol is, all right? And then also ask the support in regards to practicum and internship placement experiences. As I said, the primary focus is advanced clinical work, is teaching, is research, is leadership and advocacy. And ask if those opportunities are afforded by the program. Do they have partnerships externally from within the institution or outside of the institution? So those would be some of the questions that I would ask most specifically. So again, keep in mind, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them.
Dr. Smith, thank you so much. That was just so wonderful and like just fantastic. Like, I feel like we should have talked before I applied to PhD programs, but you know, water to the bridge. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to transition into the graduate student leadership portion. So we are going to say goodbye to you. We hope that you have a fantastic weekend. We cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your Sunday and allowing us to offer this to many students as possible on a Sunday, since we know that students are very busy. So again, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Certainly, not a problem. Thank you for the invite. And if I can support you in any way in the future, please do not hesitate to reach out, give me a call. And I look forward to seeing all of you in San Francisco in March, if not before.
Absolutely.
So take care, have a great Sunday, and have a great rest of your semester.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you in January. I know that.
In Dallas. That's right. In Dallas.
All right. So, doctoral students. So, I am going to paste the link so that students can look up our bios, because I feel like we have such good momentum. We already have questions for us. So I'm just going to jump straight into the questions. So from Ashley, what was the most difficult part about applying to doctoral programs? What advice do you have to navigate that?
Sure. So I would say I'm not muted. Okay. All right. So I would say the most challenging part I could remember was I actually took a break between undergrad and master's, but I went directly from master's to doctoral. And I would say one of the most challenging parts was I was in the middle of my master's internship, and it was extremely stressful to start putting applications together, because it all takes time. And even though once you get through that first wave of applications, it feels a little bit easier, but you still have to tailor it to whatever that institution fit looks like for you and for them. I think that that's always the most challenging aspect is, okay, well, how do I make time for this? How do I make time for my own self-care? How do I just feel like I'm not overwhelmed with the number of applications? I know that there are some who apply to 20, and I have my own observations about that, but I also know there are some who are very intentional, only apply to 3, 4, or 8 programs in the entire nation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I would add to what Christian said. I also was in my master's program applying, and I think the most difficult part, I think is added that when you're in clinical or internship, it's going to be overwhelming nonetheless. But I think for me, I was encouraged to start like the fall semester to identify programs. And so the most difficult and taxing was figuring out, one, what did I want to focus on? What program? So, kind of like what Dr. Shon Smith talked about is identifying what type of programs I wanted to go to. Was it a research one institution? If I wanted to do research, if I wanted to be heavily involved in teaching or clinical work. And so that's nice. That was helpful to like kind of navigate what I wanted to do, but also to identify those programs was overwhelming, because I think it's very new, trying to figure out, okay, who is who's done what programs are which, how are they ranked? Unlike counseling psych, unfortunately, we don't have a record of having websites to go to figure out the ranking, where you can find that a lot more, or even clinical psychology, which I found difficult. And so for me, it was also identifying first what programs I actually wanted to go to, and also those who had GRA. So it was this semester. So I don't know if any of you all are in your second year, but this was probably the most taxing of it, because I had to get my personal statement done this year and references in order to start applying. Because I think a lot of the deadlines are coming up at the end of, now and at the end of this year, going on into January. So for me, that was the most overwhelming. And so I just prepped. I prepped, and McNair Scholar. And so I had a lot of opportunities to create things in undergrad that I could tailor and like help. So I had that transition already started and seeking out mentors from undergrad and my master's. But I had to talk to people, not to do it, do not do it by yourself. I mean, I had people, can you send me a copy so I can know, Kevin, idea what this looks like, and multiple, copies of personal statements. I mean, just to me, that was one advice I'll give you. Do not do it alone. Do not feel like you need to figure it out and tailor it yourself.
Yeah, I would definitely piggyback on that. I really like what Dr. Smith said about thinking about where your career is going and what you want for your career. I was a master's student at New Mexico State University, and our master's program is actually, the master's program is ACA CACREP, but the PhD program is counseling psychology. So because of my mentors both came from our counselor educators and psychologists, I actually applied to both programs. Looking back now, I 100% feel like I should be in counselor education, and I wish I knew that when I applied, because I spent thousands of dollars making that transition. So I applied to 13 schools altogether, 6 of which were counseling education, and the other 7 were counseling psychology. I got interviews in both, but when it came to just fit, I just felt like it was an educator more than anything else. And so I think fit is really important, because when I interviewed, interviews were really difficult, and all of the letters I had to write were kind of insane. So even for me, and I think you should keep this in context, is when I applied to counselor education programs, I had letter writers for those programs, and then I had letter writers for my counseling psychology programs, just because people will highlight different things being from where you're from. So I very much think that if you need a psychologist to write you a letter, they can write, if they've supervised you, they can write both letters to both programs. But I had faculty members who were psychologists who I did not want to write letters for counselor education programs, just because the advice that they were giving was just a little bit different. Like, they aren't necessarily going to speak to how great of an educator I will be, because that's not what my master's program was focused on. So they wouldn't even think to identify that as a strength.
So the jargon they use.
Yeah.
Talk about you.
Yeah. So, really, like, I wish that I had known Dr. Smith like 5 years ago, so that I could better, like, one, the money, but two, better tailor those conversations, because I did feel like when I interviewed, I did have to, like, justify why I wanted to be an educator or why I wanted to be a psychologist on both sides, just because my letters weren't strong enough either way. So I think that kind of hurt me, but I'm here now, so it all worked out. So for Jordan, I know the difference between CACREP and non-CACREP programs for masters is significant, but is there a downside to attending a non-CACREP doc program? Should I be taking this into account when researching programs?
So I will say this, as somebody who is currently working on their dissertation and is currently in the process of the faculty search right now. So, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to, what my own career journey and goals look like, were to apply for faculty positions that were in training counseling in counseling programs. And particularly with what I had hoped for was to teach in a counseling program that had a master's and doctoral program, because I wanted to do mentoring both at the master's level and at the doctoral level, especially with regards to research. So I will say that because of the percentages right now with a lot of faculty, they're looking for a lot of faculty who have come from CACREP programs. And that's kind of the point of what's happened, particularly with those percentages. Some of the differences too is that we're also at that point in time where that's now a little bit more enforced, or a little bit more a part of that trend, because how we've seen a lot of also counseling psychologists become a part of the faculty and programs was because they were teaching in CACREP programs before that. And so that's kind of one of those other exceptions that they've had, where they've been able to continue in terms of having that mobility between programs or between positions, because they've had the experience in teaching in a CACREP accredited program. So, and most often they they start to hear and understand the philosophy and understand where you are with that counseling philosophy. So I will say that it also depends on what you foresee yourself doing. I have many friends who don't necessarily want to become a counselor educator and are in counselor education programs. They some of them want to do full-time supervision, some of them want to do full-time practice, and it's mixed. It's mixed across the board. But I would say a majority of counselor education and supervision doctoral students do want to achieve that faculty position later on in their career. So I think that it offers a lot of that flexibility.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think that the way that the field is going currently and what we do know about KCREP is that in order to go into the counselor education, so in simplistic, explanation is that those who are applying for counselor education programs they're requiring now that or highly suggesting you graduate from a KCREP program. So that's one if you go to the counselor education route. And I agree with you, Christian, if you're not, if you're trying to be a clinician or a supervisor, it's not, but we're knowing that they're starting to put in certain states, there's certain laws that are being impacted to say that you have to have graduated from KCREP program. So by the time we all are in the field and, you all who are applying to PhD programs, the likelihood of license portability and things of that sort, I'm going to assume that it's going to start affecting all states that you must have graduated from a KCREP accredited program. And so, yes, there are some people who are going to be grandfathered in, those who are teaching currently, clinicians or supervisors, it's not going to impact them. But however, you don't want to be caught in a non-KCREP program trying to, say, well, my program was KCREP equivalent, but if it didn't have that certification, it really doesn't mean anything. So I guess I'm just more so on I'd rather be safe than sorry, even if that's not my goal to teach, be a counselor educator. Who knows if I want to go back and do part-time work, and I will add to that the KCREP requirement is only for those who are core faculty. But for me, I never know. I mean, if you decide to go part-time or just adjunct, and eventually you want to go full-time in a counselor education program or clinical mental health school counseling rehab, it's a requirement that the core faculty have to have graduated from a KCREP accredited program. So I think it's what you want to do, but I would just go, sway on the side of just search out a KCREP accredited program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that we're being politically correct about this, but the truth of the matter is you need to go to a KCREP program, period, the end. There's no doubt about it, and I'll tell you why. So number one, if you want to have any flexibility in your career at all, you need to be in a KCREP program. So like at one point, if you want to be a clinician, right now a lot of clinical sites and even private sites that are hiring clinicians want people who are from KCREP or APA accredited programs. Absolutely. It also serves for the military. So if you're looking to work at any point in your life ever with veterans or for the VA or anything like that, you need to come from a KCREP program. Number two, if you ever want to move, if you're like, hey, babe, let's move to Hawaii, you need to come from a KCREP program because if you're trying to move your license, perfect example is Ohio right now, also Kansas. I meet students every day in my program who literally are just taking classes so that they can transfer their license to Kansas because they did not come from a KCREP program. And that's at the master's level. So the conversation about this gray area of either or is just not accurate anymore. We are moving towards full accreditation of all programs, and it's a huge difference. So my master's was a 60 credit hour master's. I did over 1,000 hours of clinical work. That does not stand up to if you didn't come from a KCREP program and don't have that clinical background. I'm a better candidate simply because I came from a KCREP program. So it's not just in the teaching field anymore. Now it's also for licensure. So if you want to work in Ohio, if you want to if you want to work in the Midwest, if you're thinking about transferring to California or Oregon or anything like that, you want to make sure you come from a KCREP program. So I will say that the same for Ashley's question about, I believe you're asking about the NCORE accreditation. I would check your state licensure of where you hope to live one day. So just like Dr. Smith was talking about, where do you think your future career is going? I would say the same thing about your accreditation and also when it comes to licensure. So if you're thinking about getting either an LPC or an LMHC, for instance, you want to make sure that your license will transfer. So like, just because right now, for instance, like if I'm hanging out with Mary in Georgia and I decide to move back to say I moved to Oregon, the LMHC is not it's not on the same level as an LPC on the West Coast. So all of these things are easily accessible through your state licensure. And I know things like, we all know life happens, life is very different. You may never move, you may move 8 times. K-CREP is your golden ticket to just making it a little bit easier. Now, in terms of finances, I wish that wasn't the case because my K-CREP program is very expensive. And I know other people are dealing with the same things in terms of either graduate assistantships or whatever. But me having 60 credit hours means that if I ever decide to move to Ohio, I don't have to take a single class. And that is a huge difference over paying for individual supervision or taking like an out-of-state graduate class for like $4,000 or whatever. So I feel like money invested in the beginning is worth the long run. Do I agree with the social justice implications? No. But am I going to get on board because baby girl needs a job? Yes. So.
I want to add to Desa. I'm not really sure, Ashley, if you were inquiring about the NCE, and so as well as NCORE. So from my understanding, the NCC, depending on what state you're in, is similar to the NMHC exam. And so it's going back to what Desa said. I think you're right in trying to figure out where you want to be. My only hesitation would be to wait until you know what general area you're going to be in, because I've had friends who I graduated from Auburn University's master's program, and we all took the NCCE together. But one of my friends went to Virginia, and unfortunately there was a couple of classes that she still had to take in order to get her license. So this is the kind of thing they tell us, oh, get your NCE because it will help you when applying for licensure. Well, certain states have certain requirements. Homosexuality course, you may have to take a family counseling course. So if your program, even though it's K-CREP accredited, may not require that for that state, may require that if you move or if you go to a PhD. So I would say if you already take the NCE or you're anticipating taking it in the spring, be sure to look at whatever programs you're applying to, that if you do take it, I would just take it. It is a lot of money. So be mindful of that, either of those exams. But just know that if in the event you move to, let's say, California and your program didn't require a homosexuality class, but they do for licensure, you are going to need to take that in your PhD program, which shouldn't be a hard problem. It shouldn't be difficult, especially if you have a GRA. That's the only thing I would add to it.
Yeah, so Jordan's helping us out and said ACA Guide to Licensure is available on the ACA's website, and the Knowledge Center has been a really great resource, all the state requirements in one place. So I know that it's something to think about in your PhD program, but my experience is I've found that faculty are willing to help you in whatever capacity they need to. So if it means that wherever your PhD program is not where you plan on living, look it up, let your faculty advisor know, and ask them if they're open to taking other courses. Most all PhD programs have a cognate where you can take those extra courses anyway as a requirement. So if human sexuality is something you need to move across the country, add that into your cognate. So it won't cost you extra time or extra money because it's a requirement for graduation anyway. So there's no other questions right now. So I just want to get real with you because, you're my people. So is there anything about this process or currently where you're at right now, so like where you started to where you are today, that you regret or wish you could do differently?
Ooh.
Wait, you're talking to us, right? Yeah. I was about to say, I was like, wait, are you talking to the audience or talking to us? But I would say the first part was, I really agree with this because, Desa, you talked about it earlier with this whole idea about, I wish I had applied to more counselor ed programs, because I will admit I applied to both, counseling psychology and counselor education. And at that point in time, I wasn't as conscious about my professional identity and the way that I communicated it. because everything I spoke to, I mean, I was also at the time our Chi Sigma Iota chapter president, and literally everything I spoke about was counselor professional identity. And so I just sat there speaking about, oh yeah, this is what I want to do, this is what I hope to achieve in my career, and this is what I believe in leadership. And so it really sat well with a lot of the counselor ed programs. And then in some other cases, it's not that it didn't sit quite well with the counseling psychology programs, but it wasn't necessarily a good fit. And the experiences weren't going to help me build upon this foundation so that I can actually take that when I do become a faculty member, because that was the end goal. Was I wanted to become a faculty member to continue mentoring students and to really be situated in that space to really make that impact, but across all the different levels. I mean, when you think about teaching, when you think about leadership, research, and clinical practice, or at least in my case, clinical practice, that it was, I needed all those different experiences, the variety of them. And the problem was I started noticing as I looked through some of the curriculums, and it shortlisted what some of my bigger lists, but then even when I went to the interviews, those experiences were just not, they just were not a part of what it would set me up in terms of success. And it wouldn't set me up in terms of success, not only for my own career, but also for what I would be able to offer to my colleagues and to my future mentees. So,
yeah. So unlike you two, I was just counselor education, y'all. I was straight focused on education all day. It was my thing. I loved everything about it. You guys know that about me, though. Not to throw any shade, but my partner, he's in counseling psych. So I was like, absolutely not. I'm not touching it with a stick. But no bias to them. I love them very much. That just wasn't my identity. So to add to Dasa, interesting. I mean, I think because of that background, the one thing I wish I would have done is I wish I would have, I did a lot of talking to professors at programs. I did a lot of researching. I mean, I was ready. I was willing. I knew the language. I knew, because it fit my identity from my first year. The one thing I regret is not talking to the students in those programs. I think a lot of focus is, oh, let's talk to the professors. Yes, they're a part of it and they need to know who you are and you need to know what their advisement is. But the people who are in the program will give you just how they look, right? How they look, what they're doing, how involved they are or lack thereof involvement. And you can talk to them about what has your experience been like, or what type of, they can tell you what classes are being offered, not just what is on the actual course catalog, but actually what courses. So I wish that, looking back, because I made my decision on Georgia State because I did. They were fortunately the one group of people that I actually did see at conferences a lot, but I wish I would have done that with the other programs I applied to. So I had a very narrowed and biased experience in some way on my the programs I applied to, other than the program at Auburn University I applied to as well, because I knew the students already. So if anything I can encourage you all to do is not only doing your research on the programs, talking to the professors, but if you find a student that's at that program in the PhD program, I would highly encourage you to say, can I talk to you? And also be mindful that the students are part of the interview process as well. We give feedback and we talk about, are they a good fit? Do I want to work with them for doing research? What I want to co-lead with them? What I want to mentor them? Can I see them as someone who could support me as well? And so to me, that's an important aspect, because you want to say, yes, the program might be really nice, but those people, I don't think I'm going to get along with. It's going to be a really difficult time for you. I've seen people at other programs, they're not happy because it's so much competition. So I would say that was probably something that they say, if I was real honest, I wish I would have done more of, to get to know those people. And I'm happy I lucked out. I really have a great program environment and support here. It has its moments. I'm not going to act like it's all, good. We have conflict, and I think that's encouraging. But I wish I would have done it more with other programs. I think I was slightly biased because of it.
And I mean, yeah. People will wine and dine you when you for their dog programs. They will
Absolutely.
wine and dine you, literally.
Yes.
And I mean, so in the spirit of getting real here, just like Dasa pointed out to us, I really believe that, especially as we think about diversity and when we identify with one or more marginalized populations, that being a part of those communities, there will be, in some capacities, people are going to glorify that during interviews. And then what's going to happen is that that system was not made for us.
Absolutely.
So what happens is that people glorify it and they don't know how to support it.
Right.
So it's almost like it's exoticized. And then on the other hand, when you're finally there in the system, they don't know how to support it. So it's just such a challenge. It is such a challenge. And so sometimes what happens is that it becomes a barrier to the success of students who come from marginalized communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely. So I come from a framework of actually where I'm not one to regret anything, but there's definitely different choices I would have made. So definitely like what Christian and Mary were saying, I wish that the very first semester of my master's program, I had decided to attend more conferences so that I can have met more people in counseling, and both sides, counseling and psychology, but also then to have more connections. So like, it wasn't until really recently that Christian and Mary actually became really good colleagues of mine. And that was through going to conferences. Like, I wouldn't have had those experiences if I hadn't gone to conferences. And it really took I was in my first year of my PhD program by then. So I think it's really important to highlight the effectiveness of going to convention or conference during your master's program and really feeling people out and like deciding if this field is for you just based off who you're meeting and like who you're around. I cannot stress enough talking to students. I cannot stress that enough. Like if I would have known that there were so few African American students at my current university, I may have made a different choice. I've been lucky enough to meet other African American students who are in other doctoral programs where we've been able to create this great bond. I've gotten a lot of support on campus. But me and my colleague, Tiara, talk a lot about like, we are the only two African American women doctoral students in our college. So really highlighting that was important to me. I'm lucky enough to have mentors all over the field that I can always call someone, can always reach out to someone, but really like that may have been just giving me a better awareness for what I needed to do when I got to campus versus like the first semester, I just felt like I was like, first I was like, where is everybody? And then I was like, okay, how do I find people? Because I know they exist, you know what I mean? So I think that's something to think about. And then also like, I think in the PhD game, we talk ourselves into being able to do anything because we want this degree so badly. And I would have reconsidered being so far from home. So for me, it's only 10 hours, but getting away is not easy. Like there's no moment where I'm just like, oh, I'll just drive for the weekend. Like that's just not realistic ever. And flying home is expensive. So like, I think that in that moment, I was just like, I applied to everywhere. I was like, if I need to go to Hawaii, it will be okay. I'll figure it out. Like my parents will figure it out. But now I'm like, I need to take all of Christmas break off. We can't be friends until I see my family and see my people. And then I'll be back in January. So figuring out if those are things you can do are questions to ask the students you're meeting in these programs. So like my first year, my graduate assistantship didn't allow me to go home for Christmas break for only a week. And I couldn't I don't have $5 to go home for a week. That was like, so I didn't go home the first year. This year, I will be home on December 15th and I will be back on January 12th. So it's like,
good for you.
Figuring those things out it's just part of navigating the game of the PhD. It's like, and it really is a PhD game. So for Ashley, how did you go about narrowing down your list of programs to apply to?
So I think Deza made a really good point about quality of life. I think that is so important. This is a huge decision to go to a doctoral program. Even though in some cases it's 3 or 4 years, it's still a huge decision. And I really feel like it affects so much of how we just live. I mean, that is so much a part of our experience, because if we're going to be successful, and not only academically, but it's not just in the doc program. There's so much that happens outside of the doc program, the department, and the institution that if you're going to be successful throughout your doctoral program, you're going to have to do more than what is just part of those requirements: going to class, succeeding in class, getting A's. Like, it's more than just that. And I often find like how I started narrowing down was, oh, I don't know if I can live there. Yeah.
I can't.
I got real with myself and I said, I don't know if I can live there. Even though I had an advisor who's actually my dissertation chair, and he makes a joke with me because he's like, oh, it's going to be like a few years. You'll be fine. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that again, because there are some places where I also really, now I have to also consider my safety in some cases, but also I was literally thinking, I don't know if I can do that again, because I will admit, I went to an undergraduate institution in the middle of nowhere. It was literally, there was nothing to do. And it's a different life. Coming from making that transition from undergrad to master's and then to doctoral, it's a different quality of life that you're going to need. So that's how I started shortlisting. I also started shortlisting based on which faculty I wanted to work with at the institution. So that's where we have to really do our research, is to really build upon, okay, well, I really need to be exposed to this person. I really love their work. I really care about what their whole philosophy is about. And I've just gotten the sense that I feel connected to them. And so I think you start to use that as a litmus test. And then, I think the third part is also knowing the philosophy of the department, which is a little bit hard because it's harder to read that from a website or just from some very small conversations that we do have in the profession. But I think especially it helps to narrow down that list, is if you can get a sense of what that philosophy of that department is like, it could be really helpful, because there are some departments that will accept 10 or more students a year in their doctoral programs, and there are some that will start to only accept 3 or 4 per year, and it's because the philosophies are very different in their programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other than what you said already, I think the only thing that, I would add, other than researching the faculty members, is, some websites do have their a podcast or information about what's happening at events or students attending conferences and what they did their research on. And so, I could definitely speak to Georgia State. So we have that where you can go on there and see what our students are doing, what awards are being given out. And so if you have a particular interest, you can see that not only are the faculty members doing this, but what are they doing currently, as well as faculty. Okay, so another point when looking at faculty, to the little, suggestion I would say when looking at faculty members' information is to be sure to look at when did they publish that. So my research interest is biracial identity or multiracial identity development. If a faculty member did research on it, but it was back in 1998, that's going to be
yeah.
Because I need to know, are they up to date with the research? What are they doing currently? And if they did do that in 1998, but they're doing something that's a little bit more advanced that I'm not even aware of, connected to that research, then that would be fine. I say that to say that sometimes faculty members, especially if they're tenure, they're not doing research. And so yes, they can help you out, but if you want to get published, if you want to if you want to do some research currently, it's being identified of, are they pre-tenure, are they tenure? So this is a lot of information, but you can know based on if they have assistant professor, that means they're pre-tenure. If they have associate professor or professor, they're tenured. And so those are the things to look at to know also where you're at. So this is it's a lot of gray, because it's depending on what you need, what you want to do, and is research a thing you want to work on, then that's what you need to be mindful of. Those pre-tenure faculty members, they want to do research. And so they're going to be more inviting of you being on their research teams. And we have multiple research teams here at Georgia State. And you just pick and choose whatever you want to do based on their area of interest and get publications. And that's going to help you looking for a job. If not, so anyways, I'm going on a tangent now, but it's really, that's important. And also, I'll be honest, I needed to know, for a person of color, I need to know that there's at least one faculty of color there, or someone with a marginalized identity. Because for me, like Christian said, this program is not made for it. This institution, education, the Ivory Tower, is not made for students with, you know, of marginalized identities. And so to navigate that system, you have to also know that there's someone who knows the system and who has deconstructed it. And so it was really important to me to not, you know, to not be perceived as someone being negatively talking about the program or the environment that felt like it was oppressing me, but someone who got it and also gave me tools to navigate through the system. Because that's one thing that we don't talk about, because it's one thing to be a part of the system, but having someone who kind of either does some research on it or has done some advocacy work, and you can see that on their Vita, that they can assist with giving you tools to navigate the system or tell you what paths to go. And to me, that was significant. That was extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, I would say that, like, I'm going to make it a little bit more like how I started. So how I started was I literally went on the KCREP website and I looked up KCREP accreditation programs because I was not going anywhere that wasn't. That was literally my first step. Then I was like, where can I and can I not live? So first I started out like, I can live all the places. And then I was like, boo, you can't live in Maine. Like, you just can't do it. So I had to narrow it down because I was like I said, you get so optimistic that you can do all the things. But then when I realized the time commitment, I was like, I can't spend 4 years in these places. So I literally was like, I am from California. I have very biases about the South. So the South, I just like crossed them off. Like, I was like, I just can't, you know what I mean? Like, because I think I was like, I could live anywhere for 4 years. And I was like, wait a minute, can I really? So then that's how I narrowed it down from there. Then I started looking at faculty. I started looking at research. Today, research, I think, is important to get support from, but a lot of faculty are willing to support you in whatever research you want to do if you have that drive. So it's really about, like, being 100% real with yourself, even if it's just with yourself, you don't tell anyone else, and being like, can I do this research project by myself if I have IRB support? So, like, if I have another faculty member who's like pushing me along the way, helping me figure it out, but this is my own research project, can I do that by myself? Because I wrote a thesis in my master's program, I knew I had those skills to do that. So where I came, I didn't necessarily need that mentorship, but I did need, like, the overall support. Then I went to thegradcafe.com. I put the link in the chat box. This is where I looked up, are people crazy and racist on that campus? Because I cannot go there. Like, because students will post personal experiences at that link. They'll also talk about what it's like to live there. So, like, in terms of, like, grad assistantships, so, like, students will be like, I was accepted to Georgia State, I got a grad assistantship for 5 years, I'm going there. Or students will be like, I was accepted to Boston College, I only got a grad assistantship for 2 years, I'm waiting to hear from other schools. So, like, that is a great resource in terms of that. But also, like, people ask questions about the town. People are like, someone told me I could have a car in Madison, Wisconsin. I got here with the bike. Nobody told me they get 5 feet of snow in the winter. I can't get groceries. So, like, it's a pretty good representation of, like, boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. If you aren't able to, like, really reach out to other students and stuff, or just are nervous, because remember, it's important to talk to students who are at those schools, but remember that those students are also talking to their faculty members. So, like, if you have an awkward, weird experience with me, and I feel like I get a weird vibe from you, and you apply to my school, I'm going to remember that and probably tell my faculty that as well. So remember, it's a two-way street when dealing with students from schools and also dealing with faculty. So it is 5:30. I want to answer the last 2 questions if Christian and Mary, if you guys have time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
the 7 p.m. meeting got canceled. So. Okay.
So we're going to try to be as quick and as thorough because, you know, we're all students and I got a paper to write. So as Christian and Dasa spoke on diversity and how marginalized groups are glorified but not supported, what are ways to ensure that we will be supported at the school or within our program of study? Should we talk to other students at the school or just research what resources the school has on campus that can provide support for us? So we kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you guys can maybe touch on something you haven't covered. Remember, I recorded this, so I will also send it out to everyone.
Sure. So I really liked what Mary said earlier about I needed to find another person of color at my institution. I needed to make sure there was someone else there. I think that yes, that is a significant reality that we have to work with. I also try, well, one of the ways that I circumvented that whole issue was trying to continue to connect outside of just my institution. I think that that is one of the ways that I've thankfully had so many opportunities and so much access to mentoring was because I started to continue my involvement outside of my institution. My service isn't just in my institution, it's outside in the profession. And so there are people, once they start seeing you, they start seeing who you are, your passion, your interest, what you care about, and just your whole philosophy. And not only that, your work ethic. People will remember that. They remember your work ethic on so many levels. They start to see you for who you are, and they want to promote that, and they want to foster it, and to really give that a voice in the profession. And I think that that has been so significant to what I've seen, what I've had the chance to be a part of. Because if it wasn't really for the mentors I had in the profession, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't be succeeding at all. And in some ways, in most capacities, resilient. I also feel like that is just, I think it's definitely, I think about Sam's question about this whole idea about how do we feel supported. I really believe it's talking to other students at the school, but also talking to students who are just like us, who have the, who know what it's like to be marginalized, who know what their interests are. Because I think the other piece of it too was, I mean, I know that there's plenty of faculty and students who they're not terribly natured at all, but in some cases they just don't see it. They don't see it and they don't get it. I mean, I had conversations with some students today and it's like, oh yeah, no, what are you talking about? That's totally, I'm having a good time here. And I'm like, really? Because
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I mean, sometimes that's how the conversation goes. And it's because I think that for some, this is kind of that function of privilege where you really start to, it's not like you're trying to be harmful. You're not intentionally trying to be harmful, but you just don't see it either. And so, and in some ways that becomes sometimes the barrier and so before I start going off in a whole rant here, I'm just going to go ahead and stop. So
I would just add to what Christian said and even be more specific. I, in my master's program, I sought out, because I didn't know, I think some of you reading some of your comments, you don't know what you're looking for. A lot of things we're saying is because, I mean, this is my third year. I know the game. I kind of know what it looks like. You kind of won't know until you're in it. So some of it, you may miss the mark when it relates to specific things you want or you need, especially as it relates to minorities and like how to protect yourself and support yourself. And so in my master's program, I was very intentional about identifying associations that did that for me, because I knew that the possibility, if you look at the stats related to counselor educators in the field, faculty of color and students of color going to those programs, they were limited, just like we experience in our clinical. I mean, think about our programs, our master's programs, they're limited in diversity as well. So I sought out AMCD, I sought out CSJ, I sought out ALGBTIC, I sought out the multiracial interest group. I sought out those particular groups on purpose, because yes, I sought out CSI and SACES, but I needed a specific group that was my little tribe. Christian and Dason and I know each other because we created a tribe at ACA. You will see us together. Come join us. We'll do breakfast. We'll do lunch. It was intentional about that. We'll sit and give each other intervention moments, and so, hey, you need to get this done, or you need to work on these things. So I say that to say you may not be able, because let's be honest, people are going to persuade you to talk highly about their program, because at the end of the day, it's their self-preservation and getting a job, graduating from that program. So you can't necessarily talk down on it in any way, your adverse experiences, especially if there's no one who really connects with you. You can't say, oh, it's been hell, don't come here. I mean, you can, but in a bathroom, in the side corner, hoping no one else hears, out of fear. And so I would also really urge you that if you don't find the support, finding it in those organizations, but faculty of color or faculty in general, from my experience in those groups, are good at saying, this is a good program. These are good programs that I've heard from marginalized groups. These are things that they've done at this program, and they'll be honest. And I've always had the experience, oh, you're at a good program, or hey, be mindful of this program if you want to apply. And so I would say to start developing relationships, and definitely with students outside of those programs as well. So it's all about connection, relationships.
Yeah, I would definitely echo 100% of what you guys are saying. I actually want to start here. So first, I would two like main sources of advice. So number one, which is something my friend Jamie's mom used to say, which is it's not the people in the hoods that you have to worry about. So I would start there, because today, even though people look like us, does not mean they're of the same cloth. We're not, like, we may all be people of color, but we're not all about supporting each other equally. So I'll start there with that. Then I will say number two is, you can do all the research in the world. The feel of when you're on the ground is completely different than what it's like when you're researching it. So I know those 2 points can be hard to swallow, but I'll say this. Each and every one of you are needed in our fields. Each and every one of you are making a difference to the people in your community, and no one can do that but you. So this pathway, this program, this degree is exactly where you should be. And regardless of if people look like you or not, if people are supported or not, you are needed. So that thing of what I just said, that empowerment you feel, that excitement you feel about this field, is 100% reason why to go into this field. Mm-hmm. Right now, currently, I think it's like 4% of our field is people of color. So in thousands and thousands and thousands of counselors, 4% of them are people of color, are identified as people of color. So I think it's critical to talk to students, to talk to faculty, to fill out the town, to really fill out what you can do. But I also think that your tribe at home, your tribe at convention, your tribe either in your sorority or fraternity or other people are just as important to your success as people in your program. Absolutely. I do think that today, most programs are so structured because of KCREP, you can find your program of study online. So if you feel like that program of study is not courses that you think will help you be whatever counselor you feel you need to be, that is probably not a program you should apply to. Most PhD programs do not have a ton of flexibility and coursework, because we're all kind of required to have the same information because we're all part of this KCREP system. So like the flexibility for your program will come in whether you have a cognate or not, and then whether you want to specialize. So for me, I 100% want to work with college students. I want to work with college students of color. That is something I can 100% do. There's no question about what I can do because the other coursework are already decided, if that makes sense. In terms of research and things like that, my research area, I got to choose myself, which was important to me. And I can do that through dissertation courses, working with my advisor, things like that. However, I'm still required to take a qualitative course. I'm still required to take a quantitative course. So figuring out where you want to do qual or quant, those things will come in your program. But you can find all of your programs of study online when looking up these programs. If for whatever reason they don't have a grad handbook online or don't have a layout of a grad program, that is something to consider.
Run.
You know what it's like in your gut to not feel like something is right. Mm-hmm. You not talk yourself into how this is the place for you to be when from day one, when you're looking at their website, you felt like it's not. Don't apply there. Like that gut feel is what you want to hold on to, because 5 years is a long time. Like, it's a long time, period. Like, it's going to go fast, but you would rather have 5 years of a wonderful experience, a quick experience, than have 5 years of an experience that is not great for you. And just like Mary and Christian said, we are here for you as student representatives, and we are here to support you. Either if you're in CSJ or LGBTIC or AMCD, this is a place for you to come, for us to talk to other students and to figure it out. You can join us in your undergrad or your master's program. You do not have to be in a PhD program to be a part of our community. That is the other thing that you can do now. Now, I understand that joining programs is expensive, so come to ACA in San Francisco, meet us, come to a social, figure out if we are your people or not, and then join. But this is why going to ACA is critical, because this is where you find out, like, one, that this field is for you, and two, what people in this field are also for you. So for last question, since programs are not necessarily ranked, what should we think about or consider when applying for KCREP and accredited graduate schools? If there's some unspoken rank out there, does it matter? Or is it really about the faculty that I want to work with? Also, I've seen some schools mention scholar research practitioner model, and others use scholar research model. If we are unsure of our full future identity as a counselor leader, what is more important to consider?
Yeah. Go ahead, Christian.
Oh, sure. So I just, I have the sense that I go back to what Mary was saying earlier about knowing, just looking at all those faculty profiles, seeing where the faculty are in their positionality, because sometimes you can tell if it's too top heavy, they're not all publishing. So you might not get the full saturation of research experiences where you really want them to be. And so it can be a little bit disconcerting when you finally get there and it was like, oh, well, this is not exactly what I wanted. So, or I'm not really getting all the experiences I wish I had, and I'm watching other people get it. So because I've seen that happen to quite a few students where it just was not the promise that they actually had. The other reality too is even just looking at the what kind of institution they are, because there are teaching institutions that have PhD programs in counselor ed and are KCREP accredited, and so they're still fabulous. Some of them are fabulous, but sometimes they might not necessarily offer you the flexibility which you would like. So if you want to go to a Research 1 institution as a faculty member, if you want to go to a Research 2 or a teaching institution, sometimes they might not necessarily have that kind of requirement or kind of pressure to publish as a part of their tenure package. So for a promotion to tenure, sometimes faculty are not necessarily in that space where, oh, well, I feel under this pressure to do this right now. So it's a little bit different in the types of experiences offered. I think that in some ways, going back to what Desa was saying about just the standardization of some of our programs, that they do have to offer some baseline of those experiences. So you'll get it, but sometimes it just might mean that you have to create some of the opportunities on your own, just depending on which context you're in. Because I think that some of those opportunities are like, oh, well, there's this and there's that. And so, but not a lot within my institution. So I might just need to get it outside of there or just make connections outside. So it's not necessarily saying it's impossible, but it means that there's some trying to look at just even the composition of the faculty. I know that that's kind of tough because we don't always know. We don't always know what we want for ourselves, but sometimes it does involve a lot of that. Looking at the research, and then not only that, making those connections. I can't even say it enough. I mean, just like how Desa and Mary were reaffirming the connections that we have at conferences or just in the profession, even a simple email, sometimes people will really, really gravitate towards that and say, oh my goodness, this person's interested. And I mean, I've been doing this for a lot of people where, especially if they're a master's student thinking about particular doctoral institutions, I usually say, oh, well, I know this student, their email, because I know they're not going to be at a conference, but they're going to love to hear from people who are interested. So there's that possibility too.
Yeah, the only thing I think I would look, looking specifically, trying to be mindful of time as well too, is the scholar research. So you're talking about the scholar research practitioner model, and so the different things that I looked for when applying to programs to figure out what is my niche. So I came right out of master's, which I didn't have clinical experience, and so I wanted to be at a robust program, meaning that the requirements were a little bit extreme. Let's say that. And so my program has a full long clinical practicum experience, a full long supervision. So 1 year is just clinical experience, 1 year is supervision. And then I also went online and looked at their assessments, and it provided information about how many students published for that year from 2014, 2015, how many people presented at conferences. And so for me, it gave me an idea that, okay, and also our GRA, we have a GRA where we provide teaching. So it can be our teaching opportunity. We teach online or in classroom. And so for me, I was like, well, I'm going to definitely get the supervision experience. I'm definitely going to get more clinical experience I need because I want to get a license by the time I graduate. I also want to do teaching, and it's going to be a part of my requirement, and I get paid for it, and it's paying my tuition. As well as I knew that I wanted to get supervision experience as well. And so for me, the requirements when talking to my peers, we also do a pre-dissertation, which is a little extreme. Most people admit that, but I get experience of not only doing my a dissertation like dissertation program that's very similar, but with a lot of feedback, and you get a lot of mentorship. And then I do my dissertation. Both of those can be published. And so for me, I'm on my peers' research, studies, but I knew that when looking at the course handbook about the requirements as well as, so to me, it was a actual scholar research practitioner model where it did a lot of that. But that means that to me, you have to be mindful. It goes back to what Dr. Shon Smith is. What are you going to pay me to be in this program? So if there's a GRA that's willing to pay for all those years in the program, which is why my program is about a 4.5 year program, but because I knew I was coming out not having much experience, and I wanted to come out strong, being that I'm going to be here a little longer. And so that was really important to me. Also, I'm straight out of undergrad. So undergrad, master's, straight PhD. And so for me, I wanted to get the bang for my buck, but I knew that what we're doing is a lot. It's a very rigorous program. So if that helps in a way, that's what you're looking for when trying to identify, is it a research? How strong is it on research? How strong is it on supervision? Because some programs will just have a semester supervision internship. Not that that's bad or good. If you have experience in supervision already, you don't need that. But also, if you don't want to spend that much time, and you want to get done and you want to get in the field, and that's not that big of a thing to you, you'll get your license after that, then it doesn't matter. So I would be very intentional about look at their stats. They have assessments. They have to. How many apply to the program? Who was accepted? And then they should have data on about their publication or research, or how many attended conferences, because they have to get it. It's a K-CREP. So even if it's not for you publicly, you can always ask for the chair of the program about that. So it's really about where you want to focus your interest and how, that's how you're going to find out what that really means, rather than just the jargon they're using about scholar, or a scholar practitioner model.
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree with Mary and the information she gave you. I think it will also depend on, like Dr. Smith said, what is your long-term goals? Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in being faculty, I suggest the scholar research practitioner model because you really need all three to be successful out of your PhD program when you're applying for faculty jobs. Now, I'm sure you've all seen that meme, I need 5 years of experience to get this job, but I don't have, the struggle is real. So being able to get all that stuff accomplished in your PhD program is possible, and it can be done. In terms of rank, I will say that it depends on who you are and what you're looking to do. The truth of the matter is that all of you are already 100% successful. It's how much success you want to do on your own work behind the scenes and your own time. So I have been given the opportunity to publish my thesis, but I've been given the opportunity from verbal support of publishing my thesis. So I haven't put in enough time and effort in publishing it myself because I don't have a lot of help doing that. So if you're looking for help in publications or help with other faculty members to publish, you need to make sure that faculty members are doing that and they're willing to let you either be second author or third author, things like that. Those are all questions you could ask the program chair if you like just shoot them an email. Most people are super nice about that stuff. In terms of like just scholar researcher model, I don't suggest that, just because if there's ever a moment in your life that you feel like you want to go back and practice, you need a license or you need the hours under your belt to apply for license. I personally think it's easier to get your license and maintain it than it is to not get your license in 5 years, go back and try to get it. Everything is super fresh in your mind right after your program to apply for licensure. And I feel like it ends up being cheaper in the long run to maintain your state license and transfer it wherever you are than to like kind of go back. Most of you know PhD programs, master's program, undergrad, it's like school sucks. Like, let's just be real about it. School is like, it's like, I'm not trying to do this forever. This is my last degree. Like, I need to wrap it up. So I'm going to get licensed. Like, I'm not trying to come back in 5 years and be like, oh, I guess I should get licensed now. Especially because every year KCREP changes. Every year state licensure changes. So put in the effort now in terms of that. I would say if you're unsure of your future identity as a counselor leader, I would put in the effort now just because it's just easier long term. So like if you're not sure you want to be a faculty member, there's nothing wrong with that. Faculty members now should be licensed anyway. If you're not sure you want to be a clinical researcher, doing research is always a possibility to go back to, just like clinical work is. But you make your pathway easier if you put in the time beforehand and you set yourself up with the benchmarkers. So like whenever you get to that road and you're like, oh, I decided to switch my area, I'm going to leave clinical interest behind and be a scholar. Having those experiences will be great, but making sure you already took the coursework and already did the background will just be more helpful. Yeah, so thank you for staying with us a little bit later so we can answer all your extra questions. They were fantastic. I can't thank Mary and Christian enough for pulling this together.
Thank you, Daisa.
Because, gotta support people. Yeah, so I put the link again to the registration link. It should still be open for information about us. You can look up our association websites, either at CSJ, Counselors for Social Justice, ALGBTIC, or AMCD. Google us. You can find us online. All of our emails are also through our website. So
add us on Facebook. Sorry.
Yeah, it is on Facebook. Like I said, we will all be at ACA. I cannot stress to you enough the importance of coming to ACA. I know it's expensive. I know, I can be on a whole tangent all day about how expensive San Francisco is, and I'm glad we're going there. But I'm not sure why we weren't I don't know, in Cincinnati. I feel like somewhere was a lot cheaper. But reach out to us. Make sure you're on ACA Connect. That is also where you can post, if you need a roommate, trust me, I got a roommate on ACA Connect, post there. If you need to find deals, if you come to San Francisco, share a meal. I'll give you a fish stick. We'll hang out. We'll have a good time, but make sure you're in San Francisco. Make sure you reach out to us. We will be there in San Francisco. So either email us beforehand or track us down. They'll have an app. It's like an ACA app. You can look it up. It will have information there. I think you can message people through the app now. So all of that stuff. I can't talk to you enough about coming to ACA. Yeah. I think I'll leave us on this. Again, I cannot stress to you guys enough. We need you. I need you in this field. I need you as colleagues. I hope to sit across from you one day. I consider you colleagues now. The struggle is real. The journey is long, but it's worth every penny. It's worth every blood, sweat, and tears. Probably a lot more tears than other things. A lot of late nights. But you deserve to be here more than anyone else. This is your community that you're going to work with. The people on the ground need you here. So again, I know it's stressful. I know there's a lot of moments where you feel like this may not be for you. I am here to tell you in my second year of my PhD program, this is your life. You deserve to be here. You are an educator and you are a colleague. So 100%, we hope to not just see you at ACA, but we hope to connect you for the next like 30 years. Like we should be doing this for 30 years. So
yeah. I just added my email on there
yes.
For you all to contact me. And just thanks for attending. Thanks again, Dasa.
Of course. Thank you so much, scholars. I am so excited to meet all of you. And again, thank you to Dr. Smith for being here for us as well. He is fantastic. You can reach out to him as well. So again, I will email this out on CESNet. The link. That's all I got. I'm tired.
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah, get emails. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.
Have the rest of your semester.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.